Silence is a source of great strength. Lao Tzu. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it and let's get started. Silence is not the absence of action. It is action in its purest, sharpest form. A man who knows how to remain silent in the storm controls not only himself, but the storm itself. The world teaches noise. It teaches to shout louder, to fight for a place under the sun with words sharper than swords. But silence slices deeper. It strikes not with force, but with inevitability. In the ancient times, there was a warrior who never drew his sword first. His enemies, burning with anger, shouted curses, trying to provoke him. But he stood still. His armor was not iron. It was his immovable spirit. The storm raged around him, yet he remained like a stone in the riverbed, unshaken, silent, alive in a way others could never be. To win without a word means to strip the enemy of power before the battle even begins. It means to create a space where rage loses its breath and fear feeds on itself. Those who shout are prisoners of their own voice. Those who explain are trapped in the nets of someone else's misunderstanding. But the one who remains silent remains free. There is a force hidden in silence, greater than any spoken promise. It is the force of presence, of certainty, of knowing. When a man does not justify himself, he stands above judgment. When a man does not react to insult, he shows that no insult can reach him. The great leaders of ancient worlds knew this truth. They ruled not by shouting, but by radiating a calm that tamed wild hearts without a word. In the depths of silence lies a mirror so cruel and so honest that few can bear to look into it. When faced with silence, people are forced to confront themselves. Their fears, their lies, their hidden weaknesses emerge without mercy. To remain silent is to become that mirror. It is to reveal the truth without speaking it. It is to strip away the illusions others build around themselves. True power does not chase, it waits. True power does not explain, it breathes. A man who understands the weight of silence stops fighting battles that were never his. He no longer wastes energy defending his dignity, because his dignity cannot be touched. There is no weapon sharper than a man who says nothing where others demand noise. He walks through the world like a shadow among screaming crowds. He touches nothing, and yet everything bends around him. The one who learns to remain silent wins wars others do not even see. He wins not by crushing the opponent, but by making the opponent crumble from within. Silence is the abyss where false strength drowns. It is the mountain that words cannot climb. It is the answer that ends all arguments. Those who master it do not speak to convince. They exist to reveal. And in this revelation, the battle is already won. There is a different kind of battle that unfolds in silence. A war not fought with swords or shouts, but with presence, patience, and the invisible weight of self-mastery. In this battle, the opponent is not the one who stands before you, but the forces within yourself, the need to react, to defend, to prove. True control begins where the need to respond ends. A man who resists the pull of emotional reaction steps outside the arena where others tear themselves apart. He watches. He waits. He allows others to reveal themselves without giving away a single piece of his own essence. When someone attacks with words, they expect resistance. They expect the dance of conflict, the exchange of blows, the escalation. When that expected response does not come, when the stone remains unmoved, the attacker begins to turn on himself. His anger has no place to land. His power evaporates into the void. In the ancient schools of strategy, masters taught their students not to strike first. They taught them to stand like the mountain, immovable, inevitable, to provoke a storm without lifting a finger, to allow the enemy to exhaust himself against the unbreakable silence. In the silence, illusions crumble. Aggression reveals insecurity. Mockery reveals fear. Boasting reveals emptiness. The one who remains silent becomes a mirror so clear, so ruthless, that others see their true faces reflected whether they want to or not. Words are easily twisted. Explanations are easily used against the one who speaks them. But silence cannot be distorted. It cannot be manipulated or weaponized by others. It simply is. And in its existence, it exercises a dominion far greater than any loud proclamation. The old warrior knew this. He walked through enemy lands without drawing his sword, his calmness breaking the spirit of those who plotted against him. His silence was heavier than any armor, more deadly than any weapon. It was the silent thundercloud before the storm, promising destruction without ever speaking of it. When a man no longer needs to prove himself, he becomes untouchable. He is no longer a puppet on the strings of others' emotions. He is no longer reactive clay, molded by each passing insult or challenge. He becomes the sculptor, shaping the battlefield itself without ever raising a hand. In a world that thrives on noise, being silent is a revolution. It is a refusal to be dragged into battles that drain the soul. It is the ultimate act of rebellion against a system that demands constant explanation, justification, and performance. Silence terrifies those who have built their power on appearance. It exposes the hollow places within them. It forces them to fill the unbearable void with frantic noise. The silent man stands, and around him the false towers crumble without a single blow being struck. Control is not about domination. It is about freedom from being dominated. It is about holding your center while the world loses its own. The silent man owns himself, and because he owns himself, no one else can own him. Imagine a battlefield where one side screams, charges, and exhausts itself in chaos, and on the other side, there is only a man standing still, watching, unbroken, untouched. The screams become echoes. The charges dissolve into dust. In the end, only the silent man remains. He wins not because he fought harder. He wins because he refused to fight on the enemy's terms. Power gained through reaction is fragile. Power rooted in silence is unshakable. It is not given by others, and thus cannot be taken away. It is born from within and grows stronger in solitude. To stand silent when accused, to remain still when provoked, to stay calm when mocked. These are not acts of weakness. They are acts of supreme strength. Strength that does not need to be seen to be real. Strength that defines itself by existing, not by proving. In every moment of silence, a man carves himself deeper into reality. He becomes not a character in someone else's story, but the author of his own existence. Each withheld word, each resisted impulse, each unspoken defense weaves a tapestry of quiet, indestructible power. The silent man understands that most battles are illusions, that most enemies are shadows, that most threats are echoes of others' fears, not his own. And so he chooses the highest ground, the ground of stillness, the ground where battles rage beneath him but never reach him. In this stillness, he finds the greatest victory of all, the victory over himself, and from that victory, every other victory becomes inevitable. Silence is not passive. It is the sharpest form of presence. It does not mean surrender. It means choosing the battleground. It means refusing to fight where the enemy expects, and dragging the conflict into a space where they are weakest, within themselves. In the emptiness of silence, illusions lose their substance. Every man, when stripped of noise, must face what he truly is. Some cannot bear this confrontation. They fill the air with accusations, with shouting, with desperate attempts to shape reality with words. But the silent man simply stands and watches. He does not resist the exposure. He does not defend himself against the truth. He becomes the truth. The battle of silence is won long before a word is spoken. It is a battle of endurance, of patience, of unyielding calm. The one who moves first reveals his fear. The one who reacts first shows his weakness. The one who cannot remain silent exposes the holes in his armor. A silent man is not indifferent. He feels the pull of emotion, the sting of insult, the lure of rage. But he chooses differently. He does not act from impulse. He does not allow others to dictate his movements. His silence is an act of supreme will, a declaration that he is the master of his inner world. There is no greater test than to remain still while storms rage around you, to let the fury pass through you without leaving a scar, to let the provocations wash over you like waves against a rock that will never be moved. This is the true battlefield, not the ground beneath your feet, but the ground within your chest. The war is not against others, but against the need to be understood, the craving to be justified, the hunger for validation. These are the chains that bind men. Silence is the key that unlocks them. The man who no longer seeks to be understood becomes invincible. He no longer plays the games that others need him to play. He no longer dances to the rhythms of someone else's fear. He becomes an island of stillness in a sea of chaos, a point of unshakable gravity around which weaker souls orbit without ever touching. In the mythology of ancient heroes, there is always a moment when the warrior must face himself alone, not against an enemy, not against a beast, but against the reflection of his own soul. Silence is that reflection. It shows you who you are without mercy and without illusion. Those who fear themselves cannot survive silence. They will fill it with noise, with distractions, with lies. They will lash out at the one who remains still, trying to pull him into their chaos. But if he stands firm, if he remains silent, their weapons break upon the armor of his being. It is said that the greatest generals win wars without battles. They know that to fight is already to admit weakness. The true art is to shape the battlefield so that no battle is needed. Silence is that art. It bends reality without force. It commands without shouting. It destroys without lifting a hand. The silent man does not seek to dominate others. He seeks only to dominate himself. And in doing so, he becomes the one whom others cannot dominate. Imagine walking into a room full of noise, full of demands, full of desperate attempts to pull you into the drama. And imagine walking through it untouched, unbothered, unbroken. Not because you fought back harder, but because you simply chose not to fight at all. This is not weakness. It is the purest form of strength. It is strength that does not depend on circumstances, on outcomes, or on the approval of others. It is the strength of being enough, of being whole, of needing nothing. The silent man does not chase victory. Victory comes to him, not because he demanded it, but because he no longer needs it. And so he is free in a way that those who shout, who fight, who plead for recognition, can never understand. Silence does not mean absence. It means fullness, fullness of spirit, fullness of power, fullness of self. It is the overflowing of being that needs no audience to be real. The man who masters silence masters himself, and the man who masters himself shapes the world around him, not by force, but by the quiet, undeniable presence of who he has become. The world will test him. It will try to provoke him, insult him, tempt him into reaction, but he will smile inwardly, knowing that every attack only reveals the attacker. Every insult only unmasks the weakness behind it. Every provocation is a confession of powerlessness. In his silence, he will remain untouchable. In his stillness, he will remain unstoppable. In his calm, he will remain victorious. Control that needs to be seen is not true control. Power that must constantly declare itself is already slipping. The man who truly possesses strength has no need to display it. He becomes the still center around which everything else rotates, not by force, but by the gravity of his unshakable presence. There is a kind of control that works without hands. It is the influence of energy, not pressure, of calm, not command, of clarity, not domination. People respond to presence before they ever respond to words. When someone enters a room and says nothing, but everyone feels the shift, that is the highest form of power. In the ancient world, the most feared rulers were those who rarely spoke. Their silence was not emptiness. It was the weight of 1,000 unseen decisions, 1,000 victories of discipline, 1,000 moments of inner clarity. Their silence was louder than any speech because it came from a place no one could touch. A man who needs to raise his voice to be heard is already losing the room. But the man who can silence others without saying a word has touched something deeper. He has stepped beyond the need to impress, to argue, to convince. His very being does the work for him. This kind of influence cannot be faked. It cannot be learned in techniques or memorized in clever lines. It comes only through the slow and quiet process of self-conquest, through shedding the need to control others, until all that remains is the ability to control oneself. A tree does not shout to grow. The sun does not explain why it rises. Water does not beg to be understood as it shapes stone, and yet they all shape the world through consistency, through quiet force, through the inevitability of their nature. So too does the silent man. He does not control. He is control. Those who seek to dominate always reveal their weakness. Their shouting betrays insecurity. Their aggression exposes fear. Their obsession with being right shows how deeply they doubt themselves. But the man who remains composed, who allows others to speak, to scream, to accuse, without flinching, holds the true throne. In every room, there is always someone who leads without appearing to. Their words may be few, their gestures small, but their energy is vast. They do not demand attention. They draw it without effort. They are trusted without having to ask, respected without having to insist, feared without having to threaten. This is not charisma. This is not charm. This is the silent influence of a man who has made peace with himself. And because he no longer battles within, the world around him finds no way to shake him. Imagine a ruler who speaks only when necessary, whose words carry the weight of silence. Every sentence matters because none are wasted. His presence makes others listen harder, not because he is louder, but because he has mastered the space between words. This mastery cannot be given. It must be built. Through every act of restraint, through every moment where reaction is resisted, through every instance where silence is chosen over noise. With time, this creates a kind of invisible authority, one that others feel in their bones. The need to be understood, to be approved, to be admired. These are chains. Even the most intelligent man can be a slave to them, but the man who no longer acts to be seen becomes free, and that freedom becomes power. Not the kind of power that dominates crowds, but the kind that transforms reality. Control without hands is the art of being, of becoming so centered, so solid, that others adjust themselves around you, not because you told them to, but because your stillness forces them to reconsider their own instability. It is the opposite of manipulation. It is not about tricking people into action. It is about creating an atmosphere where truth becomes unavoidable, where games collapse under the weight of authenticity, where no mask survives the silence. A man who no longer flinches when misunderstood is untouchable. A man who no longer craves to be seen is unstoppable. And a man who no longer explains himself becomes unforgettable. When people cannot read you, they project their own fears. When they cannot provoke you, they lose their grip. And when they cannot control you, they fall into chaos. The silent man does not resist this. He lets the chaos burn itself out. And when the dust settles, he is still there, calm, composed, unchanged. This is control without effort, influence without pressure, strength without noise, and in a world addicted to constant motion, it is the most disarming force of all. Freedom does not begin with escape. It begins with stillness. It begins the moment a man stops needing others to agree with his path. Most people are prisoners, not because someone holds a key, but because they keep handing it to others, through their need for recognition, acceptance, validation. Silence is not just a weapon. It is a form of liberation. In silence, the chains of expectation dissolve. The man who learns to be silent in front of judgment becomes unreachable. He no longer seeks permission to exist. He no longer waits for applause to feel real. He walks through the world like someone who owes nothing. And that is the most dangerous kind of freedom. People often confuse silence with submission, but silence, when rooted in strength, is defiance in its purest form. It is the refusal to be dragged into performance. It is the power to witness lies without answering them. It is the decision to hold your center, even when the entire world pulls at your edges. There comes a point in every man's life when he must choose: continue begging for space in other people's minds, or reclaim the space within himself. Silence is the beginning of that return. It is not the silence of fear, it is the silence of someone who has finally stopped running. This inner stillness is not comfortable. At first it feels like death. The death of the mask, the death of the persona that was always shaped for others. But beyond that, death is something unshakable, the self that no longer changes to please, to fit, to blend. In silence you begin to see how loud the world really is, how much noise is born from fear, how much talking is just a distraction from emptiness, and once you see it, you stop needing to join the dance. You become the one who watches, listens, observes. You become the presence others cannot define. There is a moment of terror when you choose this path, because silence brings exposure. Without words you can't hide. Without noise you must face yourself. But once you face yourself and stay standing, you discover something rare, peace that cannot be taken away. Not by failure, not by rejection, not even by betrayal. This kind of peace makes a man untouchable, because he no longer needs to be liked to feel whole. He no longer fears being alone, because he has found his own company. He no longer plays roles to survive, because he has stopped pretending he was ever weak. The silent man does not belong to the world, and that is why the world can never use him. He becomes a mirror for others, but not a tool. He reflects truth, but does not bend to demand. He can walk away from any table, because no table defines his worth. He can remain silent in any storm, because the storm is no longer inside him. This is where real freedom lives, not in rebellion, not in shouting against the system, but in becoming immune to it. A man who no longer reacts is no longer predictable. A man who no longer explains is no longer controllable. A man who no longer needs approval is no longer part of the game. Freedom is not the absence of pain. It is the refusal to let pain shape you. It is not the absence of conflict. It is the decision to not let conflict define your identity. It is the calm choice to be who you are, even when the world would rather you be someone else. The silent man becomes a new force in the room. He does not entertain shallow games. He does not participate in hollow performances. His very silence becomes a challenge, a confrontation, a quiet scream that says, "I do not need you to understand me to be real." He becomes a reminder of everything others are running from, their own fears, their own silence, their own reflection, and because of that, they either follow him or fear him, but they cannot ignore him. This is not about superiority. It is about self-possession. It is about having gone deep enough inside that the outside world no longer shapes you. That kind of man cannot be lured, baited, or broken. He is not above others, but he is no longer beneath them either. He is not silent because he is lost. He is silent because he has been found. He knows that every time he does not react, he grows. Every time he chooses not to explain, he strengthens his position. Every time he lets go of being understood, he becomes freer. This kind of silence is not emptiness. It is fullness. So full that there is no more room for performance, for noise, for lies. It is the end of pretending, the beginning of being. And once you've tasted that kind of silence, you can never go back, because nothing the world offers compares to the power of standing in your own presence without needing to say a word. There is a silence that feels like surrender, and there is a silence that feels like a sword. The world knows how to recognize the first. It does not yet know how to defend against the second. The man who stands silent, not because he is broken, but because he is whole, becomes something terrifying to the structures built on noise. We live in a time where identity is built on projection, where the loudest voice often controls the room, where presence has been replaced by performance. In such a world, a truly silent man is not invisible. He is unbearable. He disturbs the illusion. He breaks the rhythm. His very calmness exposes how fragile everything else really is. He does not need to announce his difference. He simply is different. His silence speaks with such depth that it drowns out the shouts. He is not detached. He is aware. He watches the game and chooses not to play. Not because he is afraid to lose, but because he no longer believes the prize is real. This is the awakening, the moment when a man no longer invests in the noise. He sees through the illusion of influence, the hunger for validation, the addiction to reaction. And in that seeing, he finds the doorway into a different kind of life, one where peace becomes more important than attention, where truth outweighs approval, where inner stability is more valuable than outer applause. From the outside, the silent man may seem removed, but in truth, he is deeply engaged, just not with appearances. He is engaged with essence. He does not chase moments. He watches how they form, how they pass, how they shape others. He does not interrupt the chaos. He lets it reveal itself. And in his presence, that chaos often collapses on its own. He is not there to teach, but people learn from him. He is not there to lead, but people begin to follow. Not because he offers answers, but because his stillness becomes a question no one else can ignore. A question that breaks illusions. A question that says, without saying, what if there is nothing to prove? In this way, the silent man becomes a mirror. And not everyone wants to see themselves. Some will hate him for it. Some will attack, provoke, slander. But the mirror does not break just because someone throws stones. It remains clear, unmoving, honest. To reach this state is not a matter of pretending. It is the result of countless inner deaths. Death of the ego's need to be liked. Death of the pride that wants to win every argument. Death of the fear that craves approval. Each time he chooses silence over performance, he dies a little. And each time, he is reborn, more free. This kind of man is not rare because it's impossible. He is rare because the cost is high, because silence demands a confrontation with everything we try to avoid. It strips us down to what is real, and most people are not ready for that kind of exposure. But those who are, they find a power that nothing can corrupt. They become the eye of the storm. They carry calm into chaos, presence into panic, truth into systems built on lies. Not with noise, not with speeches, but with the gravity of who they have become. There is no longer a need to be loud when your life itself becomes the message. The silent man does not argue. He does not defend. He does not react. And yet, he changes every room he enters. Not through control, but through the absence of it. Not through resistance, but through presence. People feel it, even if they can't name it. The atmosphere shifts. The rhythm changes. There is a different weight in the air, one that cannot be seen, but cannot be denied. Because deep down, everyone remembers what real power feels like. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it doesn't chase. It simply exists. Like the mountain, like the sea, like the sky at dawn before the world wakes up. And so the man who has walked through fire and learned to remain still becomes the most dangerous kind of being, not because he seeks to destroy, but because nothing can destroy him. This is the silence that wins, the silence that frees, the silence that ends the war before it begins. Victory is no longer about domination. It is about detachment. It is about stepping out of the invisible contracts that keep people enslaved to reactions, to triggers, to the endless games of ego and pride. The man who wins without speaking has understood that the real battlefield is energetic. And the one who controls his energy, his silence, His stillness, his inner weather, controls everything. Most people react. They do not choose. They respond to emotion, to insult, to the tone in someone's voice. They live as if each provocation is a command, as if every opinion must be addressed. But the man who chooses silence is not following that script. He has stopped being programmable. He no longer answers to old patterns. He no longer participates in wars designed to distract. Instead, he observes. He withdraws his attention from what does not serve him. He walks away not because he is weak, but because his energy is no longer available for nonsense. This kind of power is invisible to those who have never known it. They see calmness as absence, restraint as fear, humility as submission. But they are wrong, because this kind of silence is built on fire, not the fire that burns everything around it, but the fire that burns away the false self, the illusions, the masks. That fire makes the silent man unshakable, because he has already lost what others fear losing. He has already confronted the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being alone, the fear of not being seen. He has walked through the desert of invisibility and found strength in it. Now when others shout, he listens. When they provoke, he remains. When they demand his reaction, he offers stillness. And in that stillness, their weapons fall apart. Because they were never attacking him, they were attacking the image of themselves they couldn't control. To win without a word means to be so clear within yourself that no external judgment can move you. It means your value is not built on feedback. It means you do not argue because there is nothing in you left to prove. This does not make a man cold. It makes him precise. It makes his presence surgical. His silence is not empty space. It is a container holding immense intensity, directed only when truly necessary. And when he finally speaks, everything stops. Because people can feel he did not speak out of need. He spoke out of clarity. That is why silence terrifies systems built on control. Because silence cannot be twisted. It cannot be framed. It cannot be interpreted the way noise can. It just is. And its very presence reveals the manipulation behind every game, every mask, every false truth. Imagine a world where most people wear a mask and do not know it, where every conversation is layered with hidden agendas, silent contracts, unspoken conditions. In that world, the one who speaks plainly, or not at all, breaks the entire structure. He does not offer the usual cues. He does not fit into the roles expected, and that makes him unpredictable. And unpredictable people are the ones who cannot be managed. There is no method to control someone who is no longer reactive. No way to manipulate someone who no longer seeks attention. No path to influence someone who finds his strength in solitude. This is the real threat, not to others, but to the systems that feed on conformity. And that is why the silent man becomes a force of disruption. Not because he fights back, but because he shows what cannot be controlled. And when others see it, even briefly, they remember that such freedom is possible. That is what breaks the illusion. Not rebellion, not shouting, not resistance, but the silent example of someone who has already walked out of the prison. His very existence becomes a crack in the wall, and through that crack, others begin to see the light. Silence is the final weapon of the awakened man. It is the shield that no insult can pierce, the ground that no chaos can shake. Through silence, he speaks louder than any scream. Through stillness, he moves stronger than any army. His very existence becomes proof that true power needs no defense. In a world that devours noise, he remains the last undeniable truth, quiet, calm, and unbreakable. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.